I think there has been a misunderstanding. This is a private facility. It is not really your kind of place." The man saying this is named Craig Winslow. He is 47 years old. He is the general manager of Summit Athletic Club, an exclusive fitness and wellness facility located in a renovated textile mill on the outskirts of Greenville, South Carolina. A building whose exposed brick walls and reclaimed heart pine floors and industrial steel trusses have been preserved with the meticulous reverence that wealthy Southern communities reserve for structures that remind them of an era they have romanticized beyond recognition. The facility charges an initiation fee of $4,500 and monthly dues of $375. It has 208 active members. It has a 25-meter lap pool with underwater LED lighting, a climbing wall, a yoga studio with radiant floor heating, a juice bar that serves cold-pressed beverages in glass bottles with the club's logo etched on the side, and a locker room where the towels are Egyptian cotton, and the shampoo is imported from a company in Provence whose name Craig Winslow cannot pronounce, but whose price per bottle he can quote to the cent, because Craig Winslow understands that the details of luxury are the product, that people do not pay $4,500 to join a gym. They pay $4,500 to be in a space where every sensory detail confirms that they belong to a category of person for whom $4,500 is not a significant sum, and that category, in Craig Winslow's experience, in Craig Winslow's building, in Craig Winslow's understanding of the world, has a particular look. The woman standing in front of him does not have it. Her name is Zola Mabry. She is 29 years old. She is 5 feet 4 inches tall. She weighs 126 pounds. She is wearing a pair of black compression leggings, a fitted tank top, and a pair of Nike Metcon training shoes that show the specific wear pattern of someone who spends serious time under a barbell. The rubber on the outer sole compressed at the ball of the foot, the heel counter molded to the exact shape of her Achilles. The kind of wear that does not come from walking on a treadmill 3 times a week, but from hundreds of hours of squats, deadlifts, cleans, and snatches, performed with the disciplined repetition of an athlete who treats her body the way an architect treats a blueprint, as a document of intention and capability and structural truth. Zola is black. She has natural hair pulled back in a puff secured by a single elastic band. She has no makeup on. She has no jewelry on, except a thin gold chain around her neck that disappears beneath the neckline of her tank top and that holds, at its end, a pendant she has not taken off in 4 years. A pendant that is relevant to this story in a way that Craig Winslow cannot possibly understand, and that he will, in approximately 37 minutes, wish he had never been in a position to learn about. Because in 37 minutes, Zola Mabry is going to walk out of this building. She's going to sit in her car, a 10-year-old Honda Accord with a dent in the rear bumper and a law school parking decal still adhered to the rear windshield. She's going to call a number she has memorized, but has never dialed. The person who answers that call is going to listen to what Zola tells her. Then that person is going to make one phone call of her own, and that single phone call is going to set in motion a sequence of events that will cost Craig Winslow his job, cost Summit Athletic Club its reputation, cost the club's owner approximately $1.2 million in legal settlements and membership cancellations, and produce a local news segment that will be shared 412,000 times in 4 days, and that will feature Craig Winslow's face next to a quote he will spend the rest of his professional life trying to outrun. But right now, Craig is still smiling. The smile is the one he uses for situations that require management rather than service. The smile that says, "I am being polite, but the answer is no." The smile that functions as a velvet rope stretched across a doorway, soft enough to be deniable, but firm enough to stop you. Zola is looking at the smile. She has seen it before. She has been seeing it her entire life. Zola Mabry was born in 1994 in a shotgun house on Nickeltown Road in Greenville, South Carolina, in a neighborhood that sits less than 3 miles from Summit Athletic Club, but that might as well exist on a different planet, because the 3 miles between Nickeltown and the converted textile mill cross a boundary that is not drawn on any municipal map, but that every person who lives on either side of it understands with the precision of a surveyor's measurement. Nickeltown is one of the oldest historically black neighborhoods in Greenville. It was established in the late 19th century by formerly enslaved people and their descendants, and it has persisted through 130 years of systematic disinvestment, redlining, highway construction that severed its connection to downtown, and the slow, grinding poverty that accumulates in communities that the broader economy treats as a cost rather than a constituency. The houses are small. The lots are narrow. The street where Zola grew up had potholes that the city filled once a year, in the spring, with a patching material that lasted approximately 4 months before the same holes reopened in the same places. A maintenance pattern so consistent it functioned as a kind of municipal clock, marking the seasons not by temperature, but by the depth of the craters in the asphalt. Zola's mother, Diane Mabry, was a home health aide. She cared for elderly and disabled patients in their homes, a job that required a certification she had earned at Greenville Technical College, and a car she could not always afford to repair, and a physical endurance that most people associated with athletics, but that Diane associated with necessity, because lifting a 180-pound man from a wheelchair to a bed and back again 6 times a day is not exercise, it is labor. It is the kind of labor that wears grooves in your lower back and your knees and your shoulders, and that pays $12.50 an hour, and that does not include health insurance, which meant that when Diane's own body began to fail, when the years of lifting and bending and supporting other people's weight produced the predictable consequences in her own joints and her own spine, she treated the pain the way she treated the potholes on Nickeltown Road. She worked around it. She adjusted. She kept going because keeping going was not a choice. It was the architecture of survival, and you do not tear down the architecture because a wall is cracking. You brace the wall, and you keep the roof up, and you make sure the child sleeping in the next room does not hear the sounds of the structure straining. Zola heard them anyway. Children hear everything. They hear the intake of breath when a parent stands up too fast. They hear the cabinet opening at 2 in the morning when someone is looking for the ibuprofen. They hear the phone conversations conducted in whispers that are not quiet enough, the ones about the electric bill and the car payment, and the question of whether the check will clear before the automatic withdrawal hits. Zola heard all of it. She processed it the way she would later process case law, silently, comprehensively, filing the information in a mental architecture that was being constructed without her conscious awareness, and that would, years later, form the foundation of an understanding so precise and so personally rooted that no law school lecture could have produced it. Zola understood, before she had the language for it, that the distance between her mother's body and her mother's paycheck was the central equation of their lives, and that the equation was not solvable within the terms it was written in, and that the only way to change the answer was to change the terms. Zola's father was not in the picture. He had left when Zola was 3, a departure Diane described exactly once, when Zola was 12, and asked directly, in a sentence that contained no anger and no sadness and no adjectives of any kind. She said, "He was not ready, and I could not wait for him to get ready, so I kept going." The sentence was a closed door. Zola did not open it again. But the absence created a space in the house that was filled, partially and imperfectly, by Diane's mother, Zola's grandmother, a woman named Ruthie Mabry, who lived 4 blocks away on the same street and who was in and out of the shotgun house so frequently that the distinction between her home and Diane's was largely theoretical. Ruthie was 71 when Zola was born. She had been a seamstress for most of her working life, employed by a textile factory in Greenville that manufactured uniforms for the United States military, a factory that had closed in 1991 when production was moved overseas, leaving Ruthie and 400 other workers with severance packages that lasted 3 months and skills that the local economy had decided it no longer needed. Ruthie had spent her final working years doing alterations out of her living room, hemming pants and taking in dresses and replacing zippers for the women of Nickeltown who brought their clothes to Ruthie because Ruthie's stitching was invisible, because Ruthie understood fabric the way some people understand music, by feel, by instinct, by the particular sensitivity of fingers that had handled thousands of yards of cotton and wool and polyester, and that could assess the quality of a material in a single touch. Ruthie's hands were her instruments. They were also, by the time Zola was old enough to hold them, marked by the work. The knuckles were swollen. The fingertips were calloused. The right hand had a tremor that became visible in the late afternoons, when the day's work had accumulated in the muscles and the nerves, and the tremor emerged like a confession the body could no longer suppress. Ruthie did not complain about her hands. Ruthie did not complain about anything. She had a saying she repeated so often that it became a kind of family liturgy, recited in the kitchen and the living room, in the porch and the car, and every other space where Ruthie's voice could reach. She said, "They can take everything from you except what you put in your mind and what you put in your body. Your mind and your body are the only things that are truly yours. Take care of them." The saying was not philosophical to Ruthie. It was empirical. It was derived from a life in which nearly everything external had been taken or denied or made conditional: the job, the neighborhood, the infrastructure, the basic municipal services that white neighborhoods received as a matter of course, and in which the only assets that remained under her direct control were the two things she named: her mind, her body. She could read, she could sew, she could lift and carry and climb stairs and walk 4 blocks to her daughter's house every morning at 6:15 to make sure her granddaughter was awake and fed and dressed and ready for school. These were not abstractions. They were capabilities. They were the currency of a woman who had been systematically excluded from every other form of wealth and who had responded by investing in the only assets the system could not repossess. Zola absorbed this, the way she absorbed everything Ruthie taught her, through proximity and repetition, and the particular osmosis that occurs between a grandmother and a grandchild who spend enough hours together that their rhythms synchronize and their vocabularies merge, and the older woman's beliefs become the younger woman's instincts. Zola absorbed the value of the mind, and she became a student of ferocious capability, graduating second in her class at Greenville High School, earning a full scholarship to Furman University, where she double majored in political science and philosophy and graduated summa cum laude, and then earning admission to the University of South Carolina School of Law on a merit scholarship that covered tuition and books, and left her responsible only for housing and food, which she covered by working 20 hours a week at the law library, shelving books and manning the reference desk and reading. During the quiet hours, every case file she could find on civil rights litigation, employment discrimination, and the legal architecture of inequality, not because it was assigned, but because it was hers, because the cases she read were not hypothetical scenarios designed to teach legal reasoning. They were descriptions of her mother's life, her grandmother's life, her neighbors' lives, the lives of people who had been told, in 1,000 different ways, in 1,000 different rooms, that they were not the right kind of person for the space they were standing in. Zola graduated law school third in her class. She passed the South Carolina bar on her first attempt. She was hired as an associate at Harmon, Delacroix & Weiss, a mid-sized firm in Greenville that specialized in civil litigation and that had, according to its website, a deep commitment to justice and an unwavering dedication to the communities we serve. The firm had 47 attorneys. 3 were black. Zola made 4. She did the math on her first day, the way she had learned to do it, automatically, instinctively, reducing the landscape to its numerical truth. 4 out of 47, 8.5%, in a county that is 23% black. The numbers told a story. Zola read it and went to work. She had rent to pay and student loans to service, and a grandmother whose hands were getting worse, and a mother whose back was getting worse, and a family that had invested everything it had, every hour of overtime, every plate of food, every 4-block walk at 6:15 in the morning, in the possibility that Zola would be able to do what they could not, which was not simply to earn more money, but to acquire the specific kind of power that changes the terms of the equation, the power to look at a system that produces unequal outcomes and say, this is illegal, and here is the statute, and here is the precedent, and here is the remedy, and you are going to comply. And then Ruthie Mabry absorbed this the way she absorbed everything, through proximity and repetition and love, except this time the absorption went in the other direction, because on a Wednesday afternoon in November, 4 years before Zola walked into Summit Athletic Club, Ruthie Mabry collapsed in her living room while pinning a hem on a dress she was altering for a woman from the church. The dress was blue. The pins were still in the fabric when the paramedics arrived. Ruthie was transported to Greenville Memorial Hospital, where she was diagnosed with a massive hemorrhagic stroke. She was 75 years old. She did not regain consciousness. Diane called Zola at the law office. Zola drove to the hospital. She sat in the ICU waiting room for 6 hours. At 11:47 p.m., a neurologist whose name Zola would never forget, a young Indian-American woman named Dr. Priya Nair, came to the waiting room and told Zola and Diane that Ruthie's brain function was minimal and that there was no realistic prospect of recovery. She spoke with a gentleness that Zola recognized as professional but that also contained, in the particular way Dr. Nair met their eyes and did not look away, something more than professional. Something human. Ruthie died at 3:22 in the morning. Zola was holding her right hand, the hand with the tremor, the hand that had sewn thousands of garments and held hundreds of zippers and traced the alphabet on a kitchen table when Zola was learning to write. The tremor was gone. The hand was still. Diane was holding the left hand. The two of them sat there, mother and daughter, holding the hands of a woman who had told them, over and over, so many times that the words were not words anymore, but architecture. They can take everything from you, except what you put in your mind and what you put in your body. Ruthie was wearing a thin gold chain around her neck. It held a small pendant, a circular disc, unadorned, the size of a dime. Ruthie had worn it every day for as long as Zola could remember. When Zola was 8, she had asked what it was. Ruthie had said it was a button, from the first garment she had ever sewn on her own, a cotton blouse she had made for her mother when she was 14, in a house in rural Lawrence County, where the sewing machine was a foot pedal singer that Ruthie's mother had bought secondhand, and that Ruthie had learned to operate by feel, the rhythm of her foot on the pedal, matching the rhythm of the fabric moving under the needle, until machine and body and material were synchronized, and the stitching came out clean and even, and invisible, which is what Ruthie's stitching always was, invisible, the highest compliment in her craft, because invisible meant perfect, meant the work disappeared into the result, meant you could not see the labor because the labor had been done so well that it looked like the garment had always been that way. The button had come from that first blouse. Ruthie had kept it. She had worn it for 61 years. After Ruthie died, Diane put the chain around Zola's neck. She did not ask if Zola wanted it. She did not offer it as a choice. She placed it over Zola's head the way you place a medal or a mantle, with the weight of transfer, the gravity of succession, the understanding that this object now carried not merely sentimental value, but instructional value, that the button on the chain was not a memento. It was a reminder of the woman who wore it, of the hands that sewed the blouse, of the words she spoke so many times they became the walls of the house. Your mind and your body are the only things that are truly yours. Zola has worn it every day since. It is around her neck right now, beneath the tank top, resting against her sternum, warm from her skin, invisible to Craig Winslow, who is looking at her and seeing a black woman in workout clothes who does not match his template for a Summit Athletic Club member, and who is about to learn what Ruthie Mabry knew from the age of 14, which is that the things you cannot see are the things that hold everything together. Zola had come to Summit Athletic Club because she was looking for a new gym. Her previous gym, a CrossFit box on Augusta Street, had closed 3 months earlier when the owner relocated to Charleston. Zola had been training in CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting for 6 years. She had competed in 3 local weightlifting meets and 1 state-level competition, placing second in her weight class at the South Carolina State Weightlifting Championships in the 64-kilogram category with a combined total of 157 kilograms, a snatch of 70 kilograms, and a clean and jerk of 87, numbers that placed her among the strongest women in the state in her division. And that would have meant nothing to Craig Winslow, even if he had known them, because Craig Winslow's knowledge of women's athletics was limited to the Peloton bike in the cardio room and the occasional Pilates class that the club hosted on Saturday mornings. Zola had researched Summit Athletic Club online. The website described the facility as an inclusive, world-class fitness environment that welcomes athletes of all levels and backgrounds. The word inclusive was on the homepage. The word diverse appeared in the About Us section. A stock photograph of a multiracial group of fit, smiling people occupied the banner at the top of the membership page, a photograph that had been purchased from a licensing service and that did not depict actual members of Summit Athletic Club, which Zola did not know when she looked at the website, and which she would learn with painful specificity approximately 4 minutes after walking through the front door. Zola had driven to the club on a Tuesday morning, her day off from the firm, wearing her training clothes because she wanted to assess the facility as a lifter, to see the equipment, the floor space, the bar quality, the platform availability, the things that matter to a serious athlete and that you cannot evaluate from a website. She parked her Honda Accord in the lot, walked through the glass entrance doors into a lobby that smelled like eucalyptus and looked like a catalog for a Scandinavian furniture company, approached the front desk, and told the receptionist, a young white woman in her early 20s wearing a branded polo shirt, that she was interested in a membership and would like to tour the facility. The receptionist smiled. She asked Zola to wait a moment while she paged the manager. She paged Craig Winslow. Craig appeared from a hallway behind the desk approximately 3 minutes later. He was wearing a fitted navy quarter-zip pullover with the Summit logo on the chest, khaki trousers, and leather loafers that had never been inside a gym in any functional sense. He extended his hand. He said, "Craig Winslow, General Manager, how can I help you?" Zola shook his hand. She said, "I am interested in a membership. I am a competitive weightlifter, and I am looking for a facility with proper Olympic lifting equipment, bumper plates, platforms, and adequate floor space for training." Craig's smile adjusted. It did not disappear. It recalibrated. Shifting from the broad, welcoming expression he used for prospects he intended to court to the narrower, more evaluative expression he used for prospects he intended to manage. The shift took approximately 1 second. Zola saw it. She recognized it. She had been seeing it her entire life, the moment when an expression changes because the person wearing it has completed their assessment, and the assessment is based not on what you said, but on what you look like while saying it. Craig said, "Well, we do have some free weight areas. This is primarily a wellness-focused club. Our members value a certain atmosphere." Zola said, "I understand. I would still like to see the facility if you do not mind." Craig paused. He looked at Zola. He looked at her leggings, her tank top, her training shoes with their particular wear pattern. He looked at her hair. He looked at the Honda Accord visible through the glass doors, parked between a white Range Rover and a silver Mercedes E-Class. He completed his assessment the way he had completed it 1,000 times before, using the template that operates below the threshold of conscious thought, and that produces results so quickly they feel like instinct, and so confidently they feel like truth. He said, "I think there has been a misunderstanding. This is a private facility. It is not really your kind of place. Your kind of place. 3 words, 12 letters. A sentence fragment that does not identify what kind it refers to because the fragment does not need to identify it. The identification is performed by the silence around the words, the silence where a specification should be and isn't, the silence that both speaker and listener understand, because the specification has been made 1,000 times before in 1,000 different rooms, and the language has evolved to make the saying unnecessary, because the meaning is carried not by what is said, but by who it is said to. Your kind of place, said to a black woman in a fitness facility in the American South by a white manager in leather loafers. The meaning is not ambiguous. It is precise. It is as precise as Ruthie Mabry's stitching, invisible but structural, holding the fabric of the interaction together, shaping the garment of the encounter into the form that the person cutting the pattern intended. Zola heard the words. She processed them. She stood in the eucalyptus-scented lobby of Summit Athletic Club, in her training shoes and her tank top and her grandmother's button on a chain around her neck, and she felt the heat that starts in the chest. That climbs toward the throat, that sits behind the eyes and asks to be released as tears or as words, or as the kind of scream that a woman who has buried her grandmother and watched her mother's body break and spent 6 years lifting heavy things off the ground and putting them back down has stored somewhere deep in the architecture of her self-control. A scream that she has never released because releasing it would mean they win, and Zola Mabry has not survived what she survived to let a man in leather loafers determine the sound she makes in a room. She did not scream. She did not cry. She looked at Craig Winslow. She said, "What kind of place is my kind of place?" Craig's smile flickered. The question was the kind of question Kwame Osi would have asked, the kind that exposes the assumption beneath the statement by demanding that the speaker articulate what the speaker assumed could remain unspoken. Craig said, "I just mean that this facility may not be the right fit for what you are looking for. We are more of a boutique wellness club. Our members tend to prefer a quieter, more curated experience." Zola said, "I did not ask about your members' preferences. I asked you what kind of place you think is my kind of place." Craig's jaw tightened. The professional veneer, the one that had carried him through 15 years of managing spaces that cost money to enter, was beginning to show its grain, the way a polished surface shows its grain when you push against it hard enough for long enough. He said, "Ma'am, I do not think this is productive. I have given you my honest assessment. I am sorry if it is not what you wanted to hear. But this club has a certain standard, and I need to make sure that any new membership is a good fit for our existing community." Zola said, "Can I ask you something?" Craig said, "Of course." Zola said, "How many black members does this club have?" Craig's face went still, not the stillness of composure. The stillness of a man who has been asked a question, whose answer he knows, and whose answer he knows he cannot say out loud, because saying it out loud would transform the subtext of this conversation into text. And text is the thing he has spent 15 years avoiding because text can be quoted and subtext cannot. He said, "I do not track our membership by race. That is not something we do." Zola said, "I am a lawyer. I know what you track and what you do not track. And I know what the word fit means when it is used by a person who has not asked me a single question about my fitness goals, my training background, my financial qualifications, or my interest in the club's programming, and who has instead looked at me and decided, in less time than it takes to tie a shoe, that I do not belong here. I am going to leave now, and I am going to remember this conversation exactly as it happened." Craig said, "I am sorry you feel that way." Zola said, "I do not feel that way. I know it. The difference between feeling and knowing is evidence, and you just gave me plenty." She walked out. She pushed through the glass doors into the parking lot. She walked past the Range Rover and the Mercedes to her Honda Accord with the dent in the bumper and the law school parking decal on the rear windshield. She sat in the driver's seat. She closed the door. She gripped the steering wheel with both hands, and she breathed. She breathed the way she breathes before a heavy lift. Controlled, deliberate. The kind of breathing that activates the diaphragm and stabilizes the core and prepares the body for a load that the body knows it can bear, but that the mind, in the moment before the lift begins, is not entirely sure about. The load she was bearing now was not on a barbell. It was in her chest. It was the weight of 12 letters. Your kind of place. She sat in the car for 4 minutes. She let the heat move through her. She let it rise and crest and begin to recede, not disappearing but redistributing, moving from the raw, reactive center of her chest into the cooler, more analytical regions of her mind, the regions that Kwame Osei would have called the assumption testing space, the regions where emotion is not eliminated but channeled, converted from heat into light, from reaction into assessment, from the impulse to scream into the discipline to act. Zola reached for her phone. She opened her contacts. She scrolled to a name she had saved 3 years ago but had never called. The name was Vanessa Caldwell Price. Vanessa Caldwell Price was a partner at Broom Caldwell Price and Sutton, one of the most prominent civil rights litigation firms in the state of South Carolina. She was 56 years old. She had been practicing civil rights law for 29 years. She had litigated employment discrimination cases, housing discrimination cases, public accommodation cases, and use of force cases against law enforcement agencies. She had argued before the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit on 6 occasions and had prevailed in 5. She was widely regarded within the legal community of South Carolina and beyond as one of the most effective civil rights attorneys in the Southeast. She was also, and this is the detail that Craig Winslow could not have known, and that changes the trajectory of this story, the way a single degree of course correction changes the destination of an aircraft over 1,000 miles, she was Zola Mabry's mentor. Vanessa had spoken at a career panel at the University of South Carolina School of Law during Zola's second year. Zola had attended the panel. She had listened to Vanessa describe a case involving a chain of beauty supply stores that had been caught directing black customers to lower-cost products while offering premium products to white customers, a pattern documented through mystery shoppers and receipt analysis over an 18-month investigation. Zola had stayed after the panel. She had introduced herself. She had told Vanessa about Nickeltown and Diane and Ruthie and the equation she wanted to change. Vanessa had listened with the focused attention of a woman who recognizes her own history in someone else's telling. She had given Zola her card. She had said, "Call me when you are ready," or "Call me when something happens," because something always happens. Zola had kept the card. She had saved the number. She had never called because nothing had happened that met the threshold she had set for the call, the threshold of an incident so clear, so documented, so precisely representative of the pattern she had studied in law school and observed her entire life, that bringing it to Vanessa would not be a complaint. It would be a case. She looked at the phone. She looked at the number. She pressed call. Vanessa answered on the second ring. Her voice was the voice of a woman who has spent 3 decades in courtrooms and who has learned to speak with a calm that is not the absence of intensity, but the distillation of it. Every word measured, every pause intentional, the vocal equivalent of Ruthie Mabry's stitching, invisible but structural. Zola said, "Ms. Caldwell Price, this is Zola Mabry. We met at the USC Law Panel 3 years ago." Vanessa said, "I remember you. Nickeltown, the seamstress grandmother." Zola felt a crack in her composure. Not a break, a crack. The recognition, the fact that Vanessa remembered not just her name, but her grandmother, applied pressure to a place Zola had been holding sealed since she walked out of the gym, and it took everything she had to keep the seal intact. She said, "Yes, ma'am." Vanessa said, "Tell me what happened," Zola told her. She told her the way she had told Elise Garner's story and Nadine Jeffers' story and Amara Osi's story, which is to say, she told it the way Diane talked about the bills, and the way Ruthie talked about the fabric, and the way every woman in Zola's life had talked about the things that happened to them, with precision, with specificity, with the controlled cadence of someone who has learned that the facts are sufficient, and that the emotion, however valid, must not overwhelm the architecture of the account. She described the website with the word inclusive, the lobby with the eucalyptus, the receptionist, the 3-minute wait, Craig Winslow's quarter-zip pullover and leather loafers, the handshake, the initial smile, the shift in the smile, the assessment, the words, your kind of place, the follow-up about boutique wellness and curated experience and good fit for our existing community, the refusal to answer the question about Black membership, the final exchange, I am a lawyer, the walk to the parking lot, the Honda Accord between the Range Rover and the Mercedes. Vanessa listened without interrupting. When Zola finished, Vanessa was quiet for 6 seconds. Zola counted them. Then Vanessa said, "Zola, I want you to listen to me carefully. What you just described is a potential violation of Title II of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the South Carolina Human Affairs Law. A place of public accommodation cannot deny service or access to an individual on the basis of race. The statements made to you, particularly the phrase your kind of place and the references to fit and community, constitute evidence of discriminatory intent. The fact that no substantive questions were asked about your financial qualifications or fitness goals before the denial strengthens the inference. I am going to take this case. I am going to need you to write a detailed, contemporaneous account of what happened, including the date, the time, the names you remember, the exact words that were said, and the sequence of events, and send it to me by the end of today. I am also going to need you to identify anyone who may have witnessed the interaction." Zola said, "The receptionist was there. She heard everything." Vanessa said, "Good, write it all down. Include her description." And Zola. Zola said, "Yes." Vanessa said, "You did exactly the right thing. You asked the right questions. You identified the conduct. You preserved your composure. You called me. Your grandmother would be proud." The crack widened. Zola pressed her hand against her chest, against the place where the button rested beneath her shirt, and she said, "Thank you." Then she said, "Ms. Caldwell Price." Vanessa said, "Yes." Zola said, "I want this to matter. I do not want a settlement that includes a non-disclosure agreement and a check that disappears into an escrow account and a statement that says the club admits no wrongdoing. I want it to matter." Vanessa was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, "It will matter. I will make sure of that." They hung up. Zola sat in the car for another 2 minutes. She reached beneath the neckline of her tank top and pulled out the chain. She held the button between her thumb and forefinger. The gold was warm from her skin. The disc was smooth, featureless, the size of a dime, the weight of nothing and the weight of everything. She said out loud, to the car, to the parking lot, to the eucalyptus-scented building behind her, to her grandmother, Grandma, they tried. Ruthie did not answer. Ruthie has not answered for 4 years. But the button was warm, and the chain was thin, and the woman holding it had a mind that was hers, and a body that was hers, and a phone in her other hand, with a call log that showed a 3-minute and 47-second call to a number that was about to become the most consequential 3 minutes and 47 seconds in the history of Summit Athletic Club. Vanessa Caldwell Price made one phone call. She did not call Craig Winslow. She did not call Summit Athletic Club. She did not call the club's owner, a real estate developer named Marshall Keene, who had purchased the renovated textile mill 4 years earlier and had invested approximately $2.8 million in converting it into the wellness facility it now was, and who had hired Craig Winslow specifically because Craig understood the clientele that Marshall wanted to attract and the clientele that Marshall wanted to not attract, an understanding that was never articulated in those terms, but that was communicated through the hiring process itself. Through the interview in which Marshall described the desired membership profile as professionals who value quality, through the training materials that emphasize brand alignment and community standards, and the importance of protecting the club's atmosphere, language so carefully constructed that it never said the word race and never needed to because the word was embedded in the grammar, the way a watermark is embedded in currency, invisible under normal light, but visible when you hold it up to the source. Vanessa did not call Marshall Keene because Vanessa did not want to alert the opposition. Vanessa called a journalist. The journalist's name was Rebecca Torres. She was an investigative reporter for WGTV News, the local affiliate, and she had covered civil rights and discrimination stories in the Greenville area for 7 years. Vanessa had worked with Rebecca before on a housing discrimination case that had resulted in a landmark local consent decree, and she trusted Rebecca's judgment, her integrity, and her understanding of the difference between a story and a spectacle. Vanessa told Rebecca what Zola had reported. She did not provide Zola's name. She provided the name of the facility, the approximate date and time, and the nature of the alleged conduct. She said she was filing a formal complaint with the South Carolina Human Affairs Commission and that she intended to pursue litigation if the complaint was not resolved satisfactorily. She said she wanted Rebecca to be aware of the case because public accommodation discrimination in a facility that advertises itself as inclusive was a matter of public interest. Rebecca said she would look into it. She did not say she would run a story. She said she would look into it, which is what journalists say when they are being careful, and which Vanessa respected because careful journalists produce durable stories, and durable stories produce durable change, and durable change is the only kind that matters. Rebecca Torres looked into it. She researched Summit Athletic Club's online presence. She found the website with the word inclusive and the stock photograph of the multiracial group. She screenshotted both. She searched for online reviews. She found a pattern that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up, the physical response that journalists learn to trust because it precedes the analytical confirmation the way lightning precedes thunder. Among the 5-star reviews from members praising the facility's atmosphere and exclusivity, there were 6 one-star reviews posted over a 3-year period from individuals who described being turned away or discouraged from joining. 4 of the 6 reviewers identified themselves as Black. 1 identified as Latino. 1 did not specify race, but described being told the club was at capacity when the website showed open enrollment. The reviews were buried beneath pages of positive ratings, invisible unless you were looking for them, which most people were not, which was the point. Rebecca contacted the reviewers. She reached 3 of the 6. 2 agreed to speak on camera. Both described experiences that closely paralleled what Vanessa had described. 1, a 33-year-old Black man named Terrence Odom, who was a physical therapist, described being told the club was not accepting new members when he inquired in person, then watching a white couple who arrived 15 minutes after him being offered a tour and a trial membership. The other, a 41-year-old Black woman named Keisha Braxton, who was a registered nurse, described being told the initiation fee was $7,000, $2,500 more than the amount listed on the website when she inquired by phone, a discrepancy she discovered when a white colleague called the same number the following week and was quoted the standard fee. Rebecca now had 3 accounts. She had a website that advertised inclusivity. She had a fee structure that appeared to vary by the race of the inquirer. She had a story. She contacted Summit Athletic Club for comment. She reached Craig Winslow by phone. She identified herself and her outlet. She asked for a statement regarding allegations that the club had denied access to prospective members on the basis of race. Craig Winslow said he had no comment at this time. He hung up. He immediately called Marshall Keene. 14 minutes later, A statement was emailed to Rebecca from a public relations firm that had been retained by Marshall Keene approximately 11 minutes after Craig's call. The statement said that Summit Athletic Club valued diversity and inclusion, that it served members of all backgrounds, and that any suggestion of discrimination was unfounded and deeply hurtful to the hardworking staff who strived every day to create a welcoming environment. The statement did not address the specific allegations. It did not address the online reviews. It did not address the fee discrepancy. It was the kind of statement that corporations produce when they are responding not to the truth, but to the existence of a camera, the kind of statement that uses the word deeply the way a magician uses a curtain to direct attention away from the mechanism that produces the illusion. The news segment aired on a Thursday evening. It was 4 minutes and 12 seconds long. It featured interviews with Terrence Odom and Keisha Braxton, both of whom described their experiences on camera. It featured screenshots of the club's website with the inclusive language highlighted. It featured the fee discrepancy documented through call records. It featured Vanessa Caldwell Price, who appeared in her office in a navy blazer and a white blouse, her silver-streaked hair pulled back, her voice carrying the calm that is not the absence of intensity, but the distillation of it, saying, "This is not an isolated incident. This is a pattern." When a facility advertises itself as inclusive and then systematically discourages Black and brown people from joining through inflated pricing, through false claims of full capacity, through language that communicates that they are not welcome, that is not a customer service problem. That is a civil rights violation, and we intend to treat it as one. The segment did not name Zola Mabry. Zola had asked Vanessa to keep her name out of the initial reporting because Zola was an associate at a law firm, and she was concerned about the professional implications of public involvement in a civil rights complaint, a concern that was itself a data point in the ongoing study of what it costs to be Black and visible and employed in a system that rewards discretion and punishes advocacy, and that asks its Black employees to choose, over and over, between their identity and their career, between the voice that says this is wrong and the voice that says this is not the time, between the scream and the silence. And Zola chose the silence not because the silence was right, but because the silence was strategic, because Zola had learned from Ruthie that sometimes you do the work invisible, that sometimes the stitching that holds everything together is the stitching no one can see. The segment was shared 412,000 times in 4 days. The comments section became a battleground. Some people expressed outrage. Some people defended the club, arguing that private businesses have the right to curate their membership and that not every rejection is racial. Some people pointed out, correctly, that Title II of the Civil Rights Act applies to places of public accommodation, and that a facility open to the public that charges membership fees but does not restrict membership to a specific private group is, under established legal precedent, a public accommodation and is therefore subject to federal anti-discrimination law. The debate was loud and predictable and followed the script that these debates always follow, the script where the evidence is presented and then immediately contested, not on its merits, but on its implications. Because the implications require the people contesting them to examine the systems they participate in, and examination is uncomfortable, and discomfort is the thing that Americans will spend almost any amount of money and intellectual energy to avoid. Craig Winslow was terminated from Summit Athletic Club 6 days after the segment aired. Marshall Keene announced the termination in a statement that described Craig's conduct as inconsistent with the values of our organization, the same phrase that appears in every corporate termination statement, because corporate America has agreed on the language the way an industry agrees on a standard, a shared vocabulary of deflection that acknowledges the individual failure while protecting the institutional architecture that produced it. Marshall Keene did not acknowledge that the institutional architecture was his. He did not acknowledge that the training materials he had written emphasized brand alignment in terms that any competent civil rights attorney would identify as coded. He did not acknowledge that Craig Winslow had been hired specifically to do what Craig Winslow did, which was to maintain the particular demographic profile that Marshall wanted his club to have, using language and methods that maintained plausible deniability while achieving the desired result. Craig was the tool. Marshall was the hand. The termination removed the tool. The hand remained. Vanessa Caldwell Price filed a formal complaint with the South Carolina Human Affairs Commission on behalf of Zola Mabry. She also filed a civil lawsuit in the Greenville County Court of Common Pleas, alleging violations of Title II of the Civil Rights Act, the South Carolina Human Affairs Law, and the state's Unfair Trade Practices Act. The lawsuit named Summit Athletic Club as a corporate defendant and Marshall Keene as an individual defendant. It sought compensatory damages for emotional distress, punitive damages for willful and wanton discriminatory conduct, injunctive relief requiring the club to implement non-discriminatory membership practices, and attorney's fees and costs. Marshall Keene's attorney contacted Vanessa within 72 hours of service. He proposed a settlement. The initial offer was $50,000, a non-disclosure agreement, and a statement that the club admitted no wrongdoing. Vanessa rejected it. She did not counter. She said, "My client's instructions are specific. No non-disclosure agreement, no statement of no wrongdoing, public acknowledgement of discriminatory conduct, implementation of a monitored non-discrimination policy developed by an independent consultant, and financial compensation that reflects the severity of the violation." Marshall Keene's attorney said that was not realistic. Vanessa said, "We will let the court decide what is realistic." The case proceeded. Discovery was extensive. Vanessa's team subpoenaed the club's membership records, financial records, employee training materials, and internal communications. The membership records revealed what the online reviews had suggested. In 4 years of operation, Summit Athletic Club had enrolled 208 members. 7 were black, 3.4%, in a county that was 23% black. The records also showed that 43 black individuals had inquired about membership during the same period. Of those, 7 had been enrolled, 36 had not. Of the 36, 22 had been told the club was at capacity, 14 had been quoted initiation fees higher than the standard rate, and 11 had been told the club was not the right fit for their fitness goals without any assessment of their fitness goals having been conducted. The data was devastating. It was the kind of data Ruthie Mabry would have understood, the kind that does not require interpretation because the pattern is so stark that it interprets itself. Vanessa presented the data in a pre-trial motion. The judge, a circuit court judge named the Honorable Patricia Simmons, reviewed the motion and denied the defense's attempt to exclude the membership records as irrelevant. Judge Simmons wrote in a ruling that Vanessa would later cite in 3 subsequent cases that the membership data constitutes direct evidence of a pattern of discriminatory conduct and is probative of the defendant's intent. The case settled 4 weeks before trial. The settlement was $1.2 million. It included no non-disclosure agreement. It included a public statement from Marshall Keene acknowledging that the club had failed to uphold non-discriminatory standards and that its membership practices had resulted in the exclusion of qualified individuals on the basis of race. It included the retention of an independent diversity consultant to redesign the club's membership and customer service protocols. It included a requirement that the revised protocols be filed with the South Carolina Human Affairs Commission and subject to annual review for a period of 5 years. Zola's share of the settlement, after attorney's fees and costs, was approximately $760,000. She did not buy a house. She did not buy a car. She did not do any of the things that the viral commenters who followed the story assumed she would do, because the viral commenters understood money as an end, and Zola understood money as a term in an equation. And the equation she was solving was not about accumulation. It was about redistribution. Zola used a portion of the settlement to establish a fund. She called it the Ruthie Mabry Community Wellness Fund. The fund provides subsidized gym memberships, fitness equipment, and wellness programming to residents of Nicholtown and 3 adjacent neighborhoods in Greenville. In its first year, the fund enrolled 112 participants. It partnered with 2 local gyms and a community center. It purchased 4 Olympic barbells, a set of bumper plates, 2 squat racks, and a lifting platform that were installed in the gymnasium of the Nicholtown Community Center, a building that had previously offered basketball courts and a single row of aging treadmills, and that now had in one corner a proper weightlifting station where a woman or a man or a teenager from Dunbar Street or Nicholtown Road could walk in without paying $4,500 and without being told it was not their kind of place, and learn to pick up something heavy and put it down and pick it up again. Which is, if you strip away every metaphor and every abstraction, what Zola Mabry has been doing her entire life, picking up heavy things, putting them down, picking them up again. The barbell does not care what you look like. The weight is the weight. It does not adjust based on your zip code or your skin or the car you drove to the gym in. It sits on the floor, inert, honest, waiting to be lifted, and it will tell you the truth about what you can do if you are willing to approach it without pretense and without fear and without the assumption that the person standing next to you at the platform does not belong there. Ruthie would have understood the barbell. Ruthie understood all instruments that tell the truth about the hands that hold them: the sewing machine, the needle, the foot pedal, the rhythm, the fabric, the invisible stitch, the button on the chain. Zola wore the button the day the settlement was announced. She wore it the day the fund was established. She wears it now every day, beneath her shirt, against her skin, warm and smooth, and the size of a dime, and the weight of 61 years of a woman's hands, and a woman's words, and a woman's insistence that the only things they cannot take from you are the things you put in your mind and your body, and Zola has put plenty in both. And no one, not Craig Winslow, not Marshall Keene, not the eucalyptus lobby, or the leather loafers, or the Egyptian cotton towels, or the Provençal shampoo, is going to take them. Zola still trains. Still. She trains at a gym in Greenville's West End, a no-frills facility with concrete floors and chalk dust in the air, and a radio that plays too loud, and a clientele that ranges from college football players to 60-year-old powerlifters to a teenager named Malik, who showed up one afternoon from Nickeltown because he heard there were barbells, and who is now, 8 months later, snatching 45 kilograms with a form so clean that Zola's coach said, "Where did this kid come from?" And Zola said, "He came from where I came from," which was not a geographic answer, but a structural one, meaning he came from a place where the equipment was not available, and the doors were not open, and the welcome was not extended. And he arrived anyway, because the thing about heavy things is that they do not care about the door you walked through to reach them. They only care about whether you can lift them, and Malik can lift them. He lifts them every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon in a gym that does not have eucalyptus or Egyptian cotton or a $4,500 initiation fee. But that has a platform and a barbell and a woman named Zola who stands beside him and says, "Set your feet, breathe, and pull," and who wears a thin gold chain beneath her shirt that he has never asked about and that she has never explained, because the explanation is not for him. The explanation is for her. It is for Ruthie. It is for the button and the blouse and the 14-year-old girl at a foot pedal singer in Lawrence County who sewed her first garment and kept one small piece of it and wore it for 61 years and gave it, through death, to the granddaughter who would carry it into rooms that Ruthie never entered and fights that Ruthie never fought, and a world that Ruthie helped build by building the woman who builds the world. Have you ever been told that a place is not your kind of place? Have you ever stood in a doorway you had every right to walk through and heard a voice, sometimes spoken and sometimes not, that said you do not belong here, not because of what you have done or what you can do, but because of what you look like, what you drive, what neighborhood the GPS says you came from, what assumptions the person at the desk has already made before you opened your mouth and said, "I am interested in a membership"? If you have, then you know that the rejection is not the heaviest thing you will carry that day. The heaviest thing is the question you ask yourself afterward, in the car, in the parking lot, between the Range Rover and the Mercedes. The question that sounds like, did that just happen? And means, am I worth what I know I am worth? And the answer is yes. The answer is always yes. But the question keeps getting asked because the system keeps asking it in lobbies and showrooms and conference rooms and airplane aisles and every other space where a template operates, and a human being is reduced to a data point, and the data point produces a result that says no, not here, not you, not your kind. Zola Mabry's answer to that question is a barbell on a platform in a community center on Nickeltown Road. It is 112 people who now have access to something that was denied to them not by poverty alone, but by the deliberate architecture of exclusion that poverty enables and that wealth defends. It is a teenager named Malik, pulling 45 kilograms off the ground with his back straight and his eyes forward and his feet set exactly where Zola told him to set them. It is a thin gold chain and a button the size of a dime and a woman who has been dead for 4 years and who is more present in every room her granddaughter enters than the living people who try to tell her she does not belong there. The button is warm. The chain is thin. The woman wearing it is strong. Not strong in the way that the word is used on motivational posters and Instagram captions and the kind of content that reduces human complexity to a three-word slogan and a filter. Strong in the way that a stitch is strong, invisible, structural, holding everything together. The stitching that Ruthie Mabry taught her granddaughter, not with words and not with thread, but with the daily, relentless, exhausting, beautiful act of showing up, of sitting at the table, of walking 4 blocks at 6:15 in the morning, of pressing clothes and checking backpacks and asking what happened with the B+, of putting into a child's mind and body the only things that cannot be taken, and trusting that the child will carry them into rooms the grandmother never entered and will refuse to leave those rooms smaller than she found them. Zola carries them. She carries them into every gym and every courtroom and every community center and every room where someone has decided, before she walks through the door, that she is not the right kind of person for the space she is about to occupy. She walks through the door anyway. She sets her feet, she breathes, and she pulls.